The Hedgeless Horseman here. I thought I'd talk a bit about a few cases which have put out very interesting news releases lately, and how I think one should uh, view news releases that are very telling about the next 10 news releases, for example, and why I think, again, it's one of the most important things I find is knowing what is important and what is not important, and be able to weigh just how important some news is. And an example of, in my opinion, major news release is one that Timberline Resources put out recently, where they have been drilling the high grade water well zone at their Eureka project. And they had drilled with RC, which basically pummels the rock to bits and pieces, and then they use suction and water, etc., to pull out the material. And visually, it seems that some holes looked really good. They had all the, let's say, typical Carlin Carlin gold style indicators. For example, here you have these red mineral here. I'm not sure if that's Realgar or I forget about the other name. Anyway, I mean, it's obviously visually striking if you have red patches and yellow patches, and it seems to tend to have pretty high grades. So basically, they were drilling the water well zone, and I guess they were wondering why why aren't the grades higher, because this looks like it should be high grade. So then they actually did a diamond core hole. They twinned it with an RC hole. I mean, typically, I think the main reason to do RC is simply because it's cheaper and I think even faster. So it makes sense from an economic standpoint. But obviously, some systems do better or worse with RC drilling in terms of getting the actually good and representative samples. And I mean, they did a core hole BHSE 220C for core, right next to, or as close as possible to, an RC hole that again looked good visually. I mean, it had a, let's say, pathfinder or indicator minerals that suggested, okay, this should be very pregnant with gold mineralization. And the assays came out at 36.6 meters of 1.06 grams. I mean, that's a pretty long intercept, and 1 gram per ton. I mean, that's not bad, especially if it's near surface, etc. But at 138 meters, I don't know at the exact vertical depth, but anyway, then it's like, yeah, okay, I mean, this is interesting. Obviously, you probably wouldn't do a 100-meter pit to chase 36 meters of 1 gram. I don't think so, at least. But not sure. But let's say it would be marginal, to say the least. So they did this diamond core hole where basically you get the intact core, so you're not losing anything, because the theory was that the water flushed away, the water used to recover the core sample in the RC flushed away the fine gold. And lo and behold, it's like the grade jumped 5.8x from the RC hole when they used diamond. So all of a sudden, an interesting hole went to pretty much a world-class Carlin hole. And note here, it says acid intervals ends in the core hole with 7.56 gram per ton AU, but additional acids are pending. So this can only get better and not worse as well. So who knows? Maybe it ends up being 30 meters of 6 gram. I mean, that would be one of the best intercepts I've seen lately. So I mean, this is a really big deal, especially like Quinton said in a recent Crescat presentation. A lot of the drilling at the Eureka gold project, including I think most of the resource, has been RC drilling. So okay, we don't know if the water well zone is very different for some reason. The mineralization, that it's even worse for RC in terms of assay accuracy compared to other areas. But I mean, this really opens up the potential that a lot of the drilling done here, including the drilling that's put together this low grade resource, is actually underestimating the true grade found here, at least at the Lookout Mountain trend, or at least the deeper water well zone. Because I mean, if you look at some of the highlights, I did a post about this. This is where I'm pulling this from. You can see C. Again, I guess that should stand for core holes. 35 grams, 33, almost 12, and this is highlighted holes, obviously. But it paints an interesting picture, because I mean, if core holes were not used that often, because I mean, mostly because they've probably been on a budget for quite some time, I mean, you'll notice that okay, there are 50 grams per ton here, and this I guess is a RC hole, and I think there's 77. But you can see okay, pretty slim interval, so maybe this is a bit of a nugget effect, if you know what I mean. But after that, the two highest grades comes from core holes. So I just find it very interesting, and I mean, this is high grade as well, and there's a very thick intercept, 4.6, pretty thick as well. This is narrower, but still, it's like, again, I don't know the exact portion of the drilling that's been done with core versus RC, but I mean, theoretically, let's say 70-80% of all the drilling that's been done here at Eureka has been done with RC. I mean, that kind of opens up the potential, because obviously, I mean, in core drilling, you get a more representative sample because you don't lose any fine gold. So this opens up, in my opinion, this is more or less a potential game changer, at least for the water well zone, because I don't think the grades, I don't think the nugget effect or local variability explains how the grade jumped 5.x times. So I mean, if you do some math on some holes, I mean, if the average grade is even double of what the RC holes showed. These are all RC as far as I understand. Note here again, it's like the first twinned core hole, 6.11 grams over 22.9 meters. And summary drill hole intercept in the water well zone between 2015 and 2021. Okay, significant intercepts. So these are the highlighted ones. Note that there's not a single highlighted hole out of these RC holes that even got up to the one twinned hole, the twinned core hole in terms of grade. So okay, I mean, what if all these numbers, the grade here, the actual grade, what if it's double? So that's 30 meters of 7 grams per ton. This is 21 meters of 6. 32 of 3.5. 90 meters of 2, 10 of almost 5. 50 meters of, let's say, almost 4. And I mean, if if they were underrepresented or underestimated by 5.8x, I mean, some of these holes get ridiculous, obviously. So it's like, okay, how do you value that? I don't know. I just know that, okay, with this, revelation, let's say, I think the case changed a lot. Because again, it's not just that they drilled. I mean, if you look at it at face value, okay, you have one, really, really good hole, which is probably going to get even better. So, I mean, that's one thing I'm front running, but, why I bought after the news release. Because, okay, this is probably going to get upgraded. Let's say it's 25 meters of 6. I mean, whatever. It's like this is the worst interval. This is the worst result this core hole can produce. Maybe it's up to. I mean, imagine if they come out like, okay, it's actually 36 meters, because I mean, since they were drilled pretty closely, okay, they started at approximately the same depth, and they sampled this one down to 163. So okay, let's say it's 12 meters more. So okay, let's say it's 36 meters of 6 grams. I mean, that's that sounds like one of those, I don't know what you would find in a one of the famous, let's say, Carlin deposits, like Cortez stuff, pipeline stuff. I'm just assuming, because that's obviously an obscene hole in that case. So do I think that's the only hole that's gonna be, grading somewhere along those lines? No, and the thing is, you don't need a lot of this stuff to make a mine, really, because I think the margins on that stuff should be very good. So I mean, if only, I mean, the water well zone's been drilled like this. I mean, I just did a random, approximate crude calculation here. If it like one of the news releases says. At that point in time, the zone average 18.9 meters thick, average gold grade of 2.22. So again, let's just pretend that's actually 6 grams per ton, because the RC drilling was underestimating the grade. Okay. So if we just take a 300 meter strike, 100 meter width, 18.9 meter thick, and 6 grams per ton, that's already up to 300,000 ounces. And I don't know what the margin or value of those 300 ounces would be exactly, but it's like, if you get, I don't know, 500,000 or a million, let's say, I mean, that's going to be worth $100 million, I would think. So, given the valuation for Timberline when they released this, I think it was 30 million or slightly below. I mean, that again, I think that this news release alone added, an implied risk-adjusted value of, I don't know, at least 15 million, at least like 50%, because again, if this is telling about all the other RC drilling, that means that the actual resource here, the low grade one, is actually better. And if it's actually a higher grade, that means it's actually more ounces, it's actually higher margins, etc. And obviously that also hikes up the potential, because now we know that there are, you can get a 22.9 meter intercept of 6.11 grams, which is going to get better. So now there's potential for these very thick high grade intercepts as well. So it's like, it's a highlight hole in itself, which says a lot about the potential quality of the water well zone. It also says that a lot of drilling might have been understated, and that also means that everything else here might be better than previously thought, because again, it's like, I liked Timberline a lot for quite a long time. I've been invested for, I don't know how long, maybe a year, and I think it was already cheap, but it had a bit, I don't know, let's say spotty hits, some highlight holes, etc., and you knew they were gonna have to find more for it to actually, be worthy of, let's say, a standalone development at least. But I think this completely changed the case, and it's just interesting when you consider when you have that in mind and you consider short here. I mean, this obviously looks like a huge bottoming pattern, reverse head and shoulders, and I think, like, let's say, before this twinned hole, before this apparent underestimation of grade from RC drilling was known. Let's say the value creation curve was something like this. Maybe now, okay, implied value jumped up, and if they're going to be producing better holes, etc., that means they're going to be drilling up more ounces, more value quicker with each hole. So maybe it also steepened the value creation curve. So I guess I think this is a potential game changer. Certainly, it should be reflected. I mean, there's risk adjusted value for sure. So, and which goes back to my point about the most important news releases, I think, are the ones that says a lot about the next 10 or 20 news releases. Again, potential game changers. And because otherwise, if you look at the hole in itself, I mean, that hole alone is, again, impressive. But what it says about the ounces that have already been drilled up, or the holes that have already been drilled, that potentially a large part of these holes are actually, perhaps multiples higher in grade. That's again, complete game changer. And of course, I mean, from a trading perspective, let's say, why would you buy this? It's been in a downtrend, yada yada yada. But from a value investor's perspective, like, okay, if I think it should probably be valued at, let's say, 50 cents at least, and the value curve going forward is probably steeper, then obviously one would buy before the breakout, and then the traders come in and whatever. So it's like I'm just front running the fact that I think the case got a lot better with this news release, and it's an even higher likelihood that it will break this neckline, and then it should obviously go quite a bit higher, because if they end up proving a multi-million ounce deposit over the coming years with high grading Carlin, I mean those things are probably worth a couple of $100 million, and we're for sure not there yet. And I think let's see, that was the 24th February. Okay, so open 19. I mean, it closed barely higher. Maybe it had like $2 million or something in market cap the first day. So I mean, that makes no sense to me. Again, because what it says about the ounces already been drilled up, what it says about the future drilling, what it says about the water well zone, what it says about the potential quality of this entire Eureka district, which is many more zones. And again, I mean, there's more places that have been drilled, like, they're drilling the Oswego target right now, which we're waiting for assays from. And the Windfall target, I mean, how much of this drilling is core? It doesn't say C, or here, it doesn't say C, so maybe these grades aren't correct. Maybe it's the same thing over here, that this 12-meter intercept is in fact like, I don't know, 4 grams per ton, whatever, or this 22 is maybe 6 grams. I mean, it would completely change the case, and it would again, it's like I'm not sure if these are core holes or not, but 24 meters at point, that's not much to brag about. But again, it's like if this is 27 meters of 6 grams, that's this is a barn burner hole. This for sure, if you multiply this by 2 at least, double the grade, that's a barn burner hole as well. This would be possibly an impressive one. Maybe this wouldn't be that impressive. So it's like this opens up, I think, a new dimension for Timberline going forward. Again, we don't know exactly that every RC hole has been underrepresenting the grade to the magnitude that this hole did, but the chance of all the RC drilling, or a lot, or at least at the water well zone target, that the RC holes there might have greatly underappreciated the grade. That has some risk adjusted value, of course. And again, it's like if one just quickly realize the importance of the information, what it means for the future, for the potential next the future potential in the next like 10-20 news releases, or even the next news release, whatever. I mean, the fact that the hole is still open, so it can only get better, basically. One would be quick to buy, realizing that this was a game changer, and you would barely need to pay up, even though maybe it should be up, should have gone up 50% in the same day, because that's at least how much implied value was added with this new revelation. But yeah, I've been adding lately, because I think I really liked Timberline before. Now I think this has the potential to be a really good story going forward. And another example, which I think is great, is Eloro. It's basically the same point. Obviously, I'm a bit hypey. I've been buying Eloro for weeks or months now, buying some every week pretty much. Any day I'm not sure what to buy, because there's like 40 buys out there. I just end up buying more Eloro. They put out the news release that they hit 171 grams per ton AG equivalent over 373 meters. Okay, that's an absurd hole in itself. And the funny thing is that the last news release put out the best hole drilled so far. And then that was followed up immediately with an even better hole. And just to, hammer in the point, or, emphasize the importance of the news releases, that says a lot about the next 10 news releases. Instead of, if this was an infill hole, obviously that's like, okay, it brings little, let's say, new information if most of the holes were grading like this. But consider the fact that this is the best hole yet to be drilled at Iska. And not only that, it drilled this anomaly that before this news release was just, a theoretical concept, let's say, that okay, the company hopes that this magnetic inversion tracks, or is a proxy for mineralization, because it lights up pyrrhotite, which is connected to mineralization. So before this, we only had one hole. I don't remember exactly what hole, but it only clipped. It only clipped at the end of it. It only reached this anomaly, because before, when they drilled that, they didn't have this geophysics data. So okay, so before the March 1 news release, this was still mostly theory. Like, okay, it's obviously something big. I mean, if you look at the dimensions, what's the size here? And it's not cut off, I think. I mean, here it looks like it's continuing, etc. So let's just, say it's, a billion ton potential in this picture, in this anomaly. And before this news release, we had no idea if it was actually a proxy for mineralization. So this is like, okay, you have a big picture here, a big painting, but you don't know the quality of it. So this is the first brush stroke, and it's the best hole drilled on the property. So I mean, the implications of this news release is, I think it's, possibly the most impactful news release since the actual, discovery hole up at Santa Barbara. And I was bullish on Eloro because of Santa Barbara alone, because I think that's going to prove to be a, near surface, several 100 million tons, deposit potentially, that's still open, and could be worth, several 100 million, at least have, more than 300 million ounces of AG equivalent. So that's already a massive target. The one they were drilling. That's like, okay, yeah, we know there's mineralization here. That's why I think that Eloro had so much margin of safety, because it's like almost a very high likelihood that there's already a very big polymetallic deposit at Santa Barbara, which is farther to the. Let's see here. Where are the slides? Which is basically this red area here, which goes up to close to surface. So this alone is what I thought backstopped the valuation in Eloro. And then comes, this target, which is basically, I think the drill hole is, where is it? DUSB. Maybe, yeah, okay. I guess it's this drill hole. Anyway, around here, where this big anomaly starts, it's deeper down, obviously, and I think it's like Santa Barbara continues something like this. Anyway, it's like one could say that this is a new target because the mineralogy, etc., shows it, because this was very tin rich, and the theory had been that there's a big tin porphyry at depth here. So again, the implications of, you have an anomaly that's like, let's say, 1 billion tons, and before this news release we had the Santa Barbara, which was already massive, and this looks like it could be even bigger, and then you put in a hole through the guts of this thing to basically see, okay, is this mineralized? Is this mineralization? Is this a good proxy for mineralization? And you get the best hole that's been drilled on the property so far. Given the size, given the proof of concept, given what does this hole say about the drill holes that now will be drilled all over the place here? This basically paints a picture that, yes, this is mineralization, and given the results in this one, okay, grade is good, and it's a lot of tin, and I don't know if you noticed, but tin is at all-time highs. Tim has a great supply-demand picture because there's a tin shortage basically right now, at least. Anything can happen. So tin has been on a tear, hitting all-time highs. The world needs tin. They drill in one of the biggest anomalies I've seen, and they hit the best intercept yet. And what's the market's response to this? It opened up 2.3% higher than the previous day, than before this hole was known. I couldn't believe my eyes. This is probably, in terms of blue sky, economic potential, this is probably, a few billions at least, again in potential. But if you have this kind of results, first time testing it, it risks this quite a lot, because if this could have come out blank, and we would know that, okay, this is probably not a good proxy, maybe there is not, there's nothing economic, this is just a big anomaly, there's a lot of pyrite here, but it's probably, apparently not mineralized, whereas we now know that this was the, killer hole, absolute killer hole right through this whole thing. So do I expect some other holes to, more news releases to show these kinds of grades and thickness? Absolutely. Not that every hole will be. I don't think this is gonna be the best or the worst hole. Let's put it like that. So this has massive implications, obviously, for the case, because this basically de-risked this entire thing. It's like drilling for oil kind of thing. company that drills one well, strikes oil on a theoretical target done by seismic whatever. The importance of the hole is not the oil that's actually in the hole. It's that it de-risks the entire basin, and that's why just a few holes for an oil play can pack on hundreds of millions of dollars in value, because the market understands that with oil plays it's like, okay, we just needed to know that there was oil here, because we know that the size of the basin is approximately this size. So that's basically what happened here, because they already have an outlined anomaly, and now they tested it. So basically, I see this as an oil basin, and before this recent news release, we didn't know if it actually contained oil, and now we know that it had the best, quote, oil numbers that's been drilled so far. So obviously, this is like a massive case-changing thing. And again, the market opened up, the stock opened up 2.3% higher, and I think it was trading at valued at around, let's say, 260 million at the time. So 2.3%, that's like 6 million. 6 million was the initial reaction. That this whole here, the information in the news release upped the implied value of Eloro, risk-adjusted value of Eloro, with $6 million. That is perhaps the most absurd thing I have yet to see in this. Imagine, given the size of this thing, to have the proof of concept like this with those grades, I think, if the blue sky is, let's say 2 billion, and that's, diluted, adjusting for dilution. Let's say it's 2 billion. Let's say this hole here puts at least a 20% chance, let's say, of this actually being or proving to be, will end up proving to be a $2 billion deposit system, the second system, or the second deposit, let's say. That's that's a lot more than 6 million. What did I say? 20%? Was that? Jeez, I'm so tired I can't even calculate. What did I say? 20%. Yeah, I wasn't even sure because the sound was so high. But obviously that's 400 million. Right or wrong, I don't know, but 6 million, that's the most absurd thing I've seen so far in this depressed, irrational junior market. So I just hit the buy as soon as possible. Because again, I think the stock should have been up 50% easily. Probably more than that, but it's like, to be a bit more conservative. Because this is a behemoth in itself, and there's no way. Imagine you can pick whatever valuation you would want. Basically, this says that even if the company was like a 5 million, no, let's say 10 million junior that drilled a hole like this, then it traded up 60% to 16 million. That's basically what the market said, and that's obviously complete bullshit, because this is one of the largest targets I am aware of, and it had one of the best drill results I've seen, and it's the best drill result from Iska. And that just goes to show that with some, in my opinion, some common sense, and not trusting that the market is always right, the only thing you'd need to know is look at the size of the anomaly, look at the hole, and realize that, okay, this is, let's say the second most impactful news release that the company has put out. So a $6 million revaluation is like beyond a joke. And like, yeah, I've been buying today as well. I mean, I don't have that much dry powder, so it's not like huge purchases, but I have a pretty fat position already. But again, the point is, I'm going off a rant now, like typically, that you just need some common sense, because the Mr. Market right now is completely brain dead, and that's not just for Eloro. I mean, that goes for most juniors out there. There's no retail buying out there, so there's nothing keeping the market fair in terms of value, because there's been so many more sellers than buyers. But anyone with half a brain cell would realize what a game changer this is. So again, I think the implied value jumped by at least like 100-200 million, and the opening reaction was, like, in my opinion, absolutely free money from a implied value perspective. Made absolutely no sense, and that's why I love this sector, especially at sentiment bottoms, because there's like, in a hot market, there's no way you could buy it for 6 million more the day after, immediately after a news release like this. No way. I mean, remember Garibaldi Resources, which was also chasing a monster target. It ran to 400-500 million before a proof of concept drill hole, and this revalued 6 million on the proof of concept drill hole. Those are totally two opposite sides, or opposite situations in terms of results. But and this was actually, this got 6 million in added value right off the bat, on proof of concept of a monster. Garibaldi ran to 400-500 million before proof of concept. So it's like total opposite. I mean, the market is brain dead in both directions. We're at the brain dead to the downside, but when we get to brain dead to the upside, meaning that juniors will actually be overvalued, etc. Yeah, you're gonna see valuations that you couldn't believe right now, and that's across the board. Lastly, just touch on company Burin Gold. Also, I mean, I also own this one, and it's also a sponsor. Just again, the importance, just reading some details. Okay, they completed two first 1,000 meters of drilling, and just reading the comments. I'm highly encouraged by the high self-validation epithermal alteration we are seeing in drill core, and we have put a rush on initial batches of samples delivered to the assay laboratory. So I mean, okay, which units rush core? That's when they're seeing something that looks enticing, obviously. And I think they hit all holes drilled in 2022. So it's like, okay, it seems that they've hit the system in every hole so far, and they're rushing assays. Okay, what does that mean? It means that it's looking really good, obviously. And 16.8 million market cap right now. I've added some, because again, it's like, okay, we don't have the results, but I'm looking at, okay, what am I paying for this? What are they seeing? Okay, what's the probability of if they're not stellar results, etc. Am I still overpaying? I don't think so, given that this is still quite early stage. But given that they're that encouraged and have a so far 100% hit rate, I don't think it's expensive. It's certainly a good risk reward bet, I think. I mean, I wouldn't go all in on Burin just because of this news release. But again, what does it say about the next news release? What does it say about the next 5, 10 news releases? It looks like it's a robust system, etc. And okay, I'll take one last example, I guess. Goliath resources. I mean, the most important thing in their, big news release where they basically reported most of their assets in one swoop. A, the 1 kilometer step out hole. 2, that they hit mineralization in all holes. So okay, you have what seems to be a very predictable system. You know that there's mineralization 1 kilometer down dip. So if you know bundle those facts together, 1 kilometer down dip hit, all other holes hit. Okay, what does that say about all the other drilling that will take place between said hits down to a kilometer depth? Obviously that's like, okay, it seems the system is robust, so the hit rate should be really good, and they hit 1 kilometer down, so it means that the system should be very big. So again, total not a game changer because it didn't really, well, kind I guess, but it's just that there are some of these news releases that Junior put out, are incredibly important. And in my opinion, since I'm mostly a buy and hold guy, want the case to play out, and I want to be I would prefer a multi-bagger, and in that case you have to hold for a year or two at least. So it's like, okay, what did that news release say about the next news releases over the next 12 to 24 months? Well, I think that they're gonna be drilling 30,000 meters or something this year, Goliath, and I think there's a good chance that most of those holes will hit, and if most of those holes hit and they have a similar grade thickness, I mean, then they will have, after just the next drill campaign, let's say inferred resource of potentially millions of ounces. So that's an incredible value creation pace. And the impact on those 30,000 meters, I mean, that's more than most. I mean, there's a bunch of companies that can drill 30,000 meters and don't even have an inferred resource of 500,000. I mean, Goliath could theoretically jump to, a multi-million ounce system on 30,000 meters. So the value creation or ROI on that drilling is like absurd. And I mean, that's also the point, I guess, with Eloro. I mean, they have yet to drill one duster. And given how this looks, I mean, each hole here could be, an incredible value add. I mean, if you just drill a few holes and you have a sort of a grid or pane or whatever, that could infer pretty sizable. Because if you put a hole here, and I don't know, here, whatever. I mean, if all those hit on pretty good, decent widths and grades, etc., then you can pretty much infer that all of this is mineralized. Just from, 3 more holes, whatever. So it's like the ROI on that is absurd. I mean, it's way more than most companies. And that's why from a, ROI perspective and growth pace perspective, I think Eloro and Goliath in this case are, possibly the top two in terms of how much they can do with 10,000 meters, how much implied value they could create with next 10,000 meters, or let's say 30,000 meters. I think there are not many companies, juniors out there that can de-risk the amount of value they can de-risk. And that's why I love them, because again, you can have a windfall deposit by Cisco Mining. I mean, they've drilled 1 million meters. Imagine if you drilled 1 million meters here. So there is a big difference, between exploration stories. And obviously, if you have a poor ore body and you put down 10,000 meters, that's gonna have you're gonna be proving up less gold than if you have a disseminated high grade system. I mean, there's high sulfidation systems that's been sold after. Well, this was early. Now I think they're more risk averse miners, but there have been stories about some high sulfidation system in Peru. I think that was like acquired by Barrick after 9 holes or something like that, because that kind of system, a blanket system, thick blanket system, you can drill a pretty wide spaced grid, and you can infer a huge resource right off the bat. Whereas if it's a nuggety vein system, let's say, then you have to drill a lot more, and the implied value creation pace is of course lower than for a system where you can have big step outs and it's a relatively homogeneous system, that there's mineralization between the holes, etc., and that's not 50% miss rate. Yeah, okay, this was as always a way longer rant than I planned to do, but I hope I drove home the main points, that there's some news releases that again completely change the picture and change the trajectory of growth for a company, and it's very telling about the next 5 to 10 news releases, not just the result itself. It's just, in Timberline's case, it's just not that it's a good hole that they drilled, it's that it can get better. Two, what does it say about all the other RC drilling that's been done? What does it say about the future drilling at the water well zone or any other target where they probably are going to use diamond core right now? In Eloro's case, it's like, okay, before this news release, this was just a very large anomaly, and we didn't even know if it was mineralized, and that if this geophysics was a good proxy for mineralization. And now with this hole, it basically says that yes, this looks to be in fact a huge tin porphyry, and they put out the best hole. So what does that say about the next 30 holes that's going to be drilled here? What does it say that Eloro will look like in, say, 2 years? There's a good chance that, there's at least a decent chance that they will be sitting at a major tin porphyry deposit on top of the already large Santa Barbara. And they might still be, open still, and they might even find more. But it's like, it's not that the hole itself, that yes, it's a nice hole. It's that it de-risked this entire thing. And again, the grades we're seeing, it means, I mean, it could be 373 meters of 50 gram per ton AG equivalent. Obviously, the implied value in this picture would be far less than what they drilled now with 173 grams per ton AU equivalent. So it's like, it said a lot about the quality and, obviously then the blue sky potential. So it's like, again, a massive news release, and the market's like, totally asleep at the wheel. It's like, if you understand some, use some common sense, let's say, what they say about the case. I mean, you could have piled into Eloro without even paying for this information. I mean, it's absurd. And again, that's why you want to be, in my opinion, a frantic buyer in this market environment, because you can buy news like this without even paying for it. You can just, obviously, in Eloro's case, you could just, not even own a share of Eloro, and then you see this, it's like, okay, Jesus, now the blue sky potential for Eloro doubled with this news release. And you necessarily didn't even need to pay up more than 6 million. 2.3%. Again, it's like, that should not happen in a rational or efficient market, but it does right now, because the market is far from rational in the junior space. Okay, thanks for listening, guys. Bye.